Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 5 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start that, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. Alright, on to the stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from OK Performance 342. Should have pre-approved my remote day due to sickness? Okay. This happened in my old job and I was reminded of it today. Thought it would fit here. In my old job, we had a great boss and hybrid work. If we had any reason not to come to the office, just a message to him and extra remote day would be approved. Then he was let go and we got a new boss, who was the exact opposite of her predecessor. This happened a few weeks after our old boss was let go and his boss became our new boss. One morning, I wasn't feeling well. Too sick to travel to the office, but not too sick to work from home. I had a couple of remote meetings with customers, so it was just easier for me to work while being a little sick than trying to reschedule. I spoke with my boss in Slack, and our conversation was like this. Good morning, I have a sore throat and a slight fever. I'll be working from home today, so no need to reschedule anything. Our employee handbook clearly states that remote days are Tuesday and Thursday, and exceptions need to be pre-approved by the manager. I was pissed. Is she really trying to force me to the office even when I'm sick? Or what was her motive? But then it hit me, it doesn't matter, and our discussion continued. Oh, sorry, that's true. I have a sore throat and a slight fever. I'm unable to come to the office, so I'm taking a sick day. Could you ask someone to reschedule the meetings with customer A and customer B since I'm recovering at home at least for today? The employer handbook states that I can take 3 sick days in a row without a doctor's note, but I'm willing to make an exception and get you one if you want me to. Do you want it? I was left on red for 10 minutes. She started typing, deleted the text, started again, and deleted it again. She was active in our chat for an entire 10 minutes until I finally got a response. No, that won't be necessary. I'll ask someone to reschedule those meetings. Get well soon. My colleagues almost died in laughter when I told them why I'm having a sick day and not just working from home. Our boss didn't like me after that, but the feeling was mutual. I left the company later for a new job, but not before she was fired. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Growinwolf. It says, hybrid work, used when a company knows that having people in the office is not actually necessary, but they would rather increase air pollution than admit that they lease too much office space. Another commenter down below called Memnock the Red said, tell us why bad boss was fired. Inquiring minds want to know. OP responded and said, she was a commercial director. Last year before she joined the company, it made €606,000 profit. In her first year, €413,000. Second year, €1,000. And she was fired at the end of the third. She was there before I was, but during my time, she focused on standardizing the sales process, which led to us losing the sales and bringing in less money. For example, we couldn't modify text in proposals for the customers without asking permission from productization. And even after that, only marketing would be allowed to make changes. And this was even in situations where the customer didn't want some feature our product had. We couldn't even remove the text about it. It led to situations where we heard from the customers that we focused in completely unrelated things, not those which were relevant to the customer, and their board chose another vendor, even if the internal champion believed we were much better, which we said would happen before this new model was implemented. I'd say this new boss really doesn't know what's going on around them or what's best for the company, made clearly evident by how much they lost the company in the 3 years that they were there. Wow. A €413,000 profit in the first year to a €1,000 profit in the second year, you'd think they would have let her go right then and there. This story comes to us from Silent Layer 3370. Level that entire field? You got it, Lieutenant. Story from my grandfather's time in the RAAF. He was a heavy mechanic transport officer, worked around a lot of heavy machinery, and did maintenance on runways. He was assigned to a base on a Pacific island somewhere, and he was working on a bulldozer in one of their maintenance sheds. An uppity, just out of Duntroon lieutenant walked up to him and demanded that he level a field with the bulldozer as they were preparing for an exercise. He told him to level that field and level every gosh darn thing on that field. My grandfather replied that he wasn't trained in the use of the bulldozer, he was just repairing a part on it. The lieutenant snapped back and said, "A commanding officer just gave you an order, now get in that bulldozer and level that field." Pop thought, F it, what's the worst that could happen? And he jumped in the dozer and started leveling the field. Here's where it got malicious. In the area of the field, there was a brand new jail that had been constructed. It was a temporary wooden building for use while the Air Force waited for supplies to build a more steady concrete building. The construction had only been recently completed, and nothing had been moved into the building yet. Anyway, during his journey to flatten the field for the lieutenant's exercise, my pop accidentally clipped the wall of the jail and caused it to begin collapsing. At this point, he knew he was effed. He was going to be in trouble no matter what he did. So he thought, well, F it. The lieutenant told me to flatten the field and every gosh darn thing on that field. Pop just ended up bulldozing the entire jail and flattening it out along with the rest of the field. He ended up being court-martialed for destroying our AAF property. He represented himself and only asked that he question the lieutenant that asked him to do the work on the field. "Lieutenant, did you ask me to level the field with a bulldozer?" "Yes, but I didn't tell you to level the jail as well." "But you did instruct me to use the bulldozer to level the field." "Yes, I did." "Lieutenant, did I warn you that I wasn't instructed on the use of the bulldozer?" "Yes, but..." "Lieutenant, did you tell me to level everything on that field?" "Yes, but..." "Lieutenant, is the jailhouse on the field that you instructed me someone not trained in the use of a bulldozer to level?" "Yes, Corporal, the jailhouse is on that field." The only trouble my pop got into with this one was the adjudicator of the case told my pop to listen far more carefully to the orders of a superior officer. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Ollie Scott. It says, "He was lucky that the lieutenant was that honest. The lieutenant could easily have said that he told him to be careful of the building. A lot of people would have." OP responded to this one and said, "This was in the late 50s and 60s, and the lieutenant was young, probably a combo of being raised by a good family and being too naive to lie." I think OP should have gotten some clarification when they were told to listen more closely to what their superiors were saying, because OP did exactly what the superior said. So do they want OP to actually listen to what they're saying, or listen for what they're meaning? That's the question. This story comes to us from Condessa Stace. Crickets be terrifying. A few years ago, I got a new phone. I let the vendor set all of the notifications since I wasn't and still am not really into phones, talking or texting, and it seemed easier to let him do it. At the time, I had a desk job, and I would set my alarm to go off to remind me to do some walking during my breaks. Otherwise, I would sit all day and have noodle legs while trying to get home at the end of the day. So the other day after I bought my phone, I go to work. Morning break, I remembered without needing the alarm, so I shut it down before it could sound off. Lunch comes and goes, so then it gets to be late afternoon. My office partner and I are in our after lunch slowdown. Not quite sleepy, but less than alert. Then my phone alarm goes off. After office partner and I peeled ourselves off the ceiling, I frantically pawed at the phone for a while before finding the shutoff for the alarm. The vendor had set all of the notifications to Reveille. You know, the army wake-up trumpet song? I apologized to my office partner over and over again. WTF, Condessa, WTF, and let him watch while I figured out how to change all of the notification settings to something less alarming. I set it to crickets. I thought the sound was annoying enough to get me up and walking, and nobody is afraid of crickets, so I was safe there. Or so I thought. Office partner and I got a kick out of telling that story every chance we got, and it always got a laugh. Until one Friday evening, I was leaving late, in the elevator with some other stragglers, and I get one of my rare texts. Granted, it sounded really loud in that tiny elevator, but I was shocked to see mean girl sneers on everyone's faces. One of the ladies says, "That's your ringtone?" Yes. And I tell the story of how it came to be the default and end with, "Because nobody is afraid of crickets." More sneers and a sulky, "Some people are afraid of crickets," from the back. Then the one who spoke up, I guess she was the leader or whatever, begins to tell me how to change the volume and ringtone so as to not upset others. I'm not a phone person, so I would have been fine with that. The problem was that she added condescending to the sneer. That opened it up for the rest of the women to ramp up the sneers and condescending remarks. I basically shut down at that point because watching a bunch of 30-somethings turn into high school mean girls was freaking me out. Over a ringtone. Monday morning rolls around and I get called into my supervisor's office. She looked very, very embarrassed. So embarrassed that it took her a few tries to get out what she had to say. Apparently, the mean girls had complained to their boss about my vile ringtone and insisted that she do something about it. She complained to my boss, and my boss had lower seniority. She basically apologized for making me change my ringtone. So I went back to my office and told office partner the whole story. We stared at each other for a few moments before we started laughing. "I know what you're going to do, Condessa. Go for it." Then I changed all of the notifications back to Reveille. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Woke Britain. It says, "What type of person tells teacher about something as innocuous as a bloody ringtone long after leaving school?" OP responded to this one and said, "Yeah, I never knew anything was off about them until this episode. I used to tell new coworkers that complaints are like Monopoly money. You only get so much before you are broke. So be careful with them. Guess these ladies never got that memo." So now that OP's changed their ringtone back to the original one, I'm hoping they find every opportunity they can to get into the elevator with those same mean girls, and also have their coworker text them a couple seconds after they get in there. You know, just for comedic effect. Extra points if OP would just change their ringtone to a blood-curdling scream. This story comes to us from Adiantum Verneris. "Make it so a person with zero knowledge could understand it." Okay. "My previous workplace was an NGO, hired me to do what was deemed an impossible task, reaching to and gaining the support of several groups that are notoriously difficult to recruit. It was a pretty critical point, with over $1.2 million funding depending on it. Not to brag, but this is something I am actually an expert in, one of very few in my country. I got to work and used some pretty unorthodox methods. Initially, management seemed to be fine with it, since it proved extremely effective. Within 8 months, the organization moved from being irrelevant at best to having a small army of volunteers, active groups, and vocal ambassadors, and gained a reputation for being the most radical and interesting player on the scene. The thing is, this success was because I was there to cover for the organization's irrelevance. As long as they don't implement some deeper changes, this is as good as it will get. Except nobody seemed very interested at implementing any deeper changes. In fact, they began doing increasingly more problematic stuff. Think public racist comments by staff members, making it harder and harder to maintain the support. I kept raising the alarm that this will not end well, and at some point, this and my less than standard methods annoyed management enough that they decided to fire me. I pointed out to my manager that if they don't want to lose all of the work, they'll at least have to recruit someone with similar experience, which is going to be very difficult to do. Again, very few experts on this. In response, my manager demanded that I write down a document for my future replacement, and, specifically, that I make it so a person with absolutely zero previous knowledge could understand it. Zero knowledge, you say? Alright. I sat down and wrote an extensive document, which included nothing but the most obvious, basic, and offensively unhelpful information. No, you cannot call people racist remark. No, not even when they aren't present. Phrased as if it was written for a third grader. If they hire someone competent, they won't need that document anyway. If they hire someone clueless, well, they'll probably be able to understand it. I ended my employment there in September, but stayed in touch with some of my former crew. By the end of November, half the volunteers I recruited dropped out. The 200 plus people involved in one of the flagship projects just stopped showing up. The assistance network stopped responding altogether. An attempt was made to continue one of the other long-running projects, but since they didn't know how or why it worked, it flopped gloriously and stopped running after one more session. The annual fundraiser I started failed to have any relevance when they attempted to copy it this December, and only 7 people showed up. 3 of the groups decided to exit and operate under a different host, after also going public about the management being both out of touch and abusive. Oh, and as of today, it seems like they lost the $1.2 million in funding as well. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called TJamesV. It says, "Wow, talk about manglement. You've got to be seriously out of touch to see a successful project, poison it with bad PR, and then fire the expert behind it for raising concerns. Then to have the nerve and ignorance to ask said expert to write a cheat sheet for dummies to handle this huge, complicated, high-stakes project, as if a new hire with a tutorial can replace the effing expert." OP responded to this one and said, "It was both infuriating and hilarious to me that they both fired me due to taking an issue with my methods," that's what they claimed anyway, "and at the same breath, asked for the recipe." OP, once somebody says you're fired, you don't have to do anything else for them, especially something that's going to help the company continue without your presence. If management didn't have the wherewithal to make you do this before you got fired, that's on them. This story comes to us from Mochi Karan. "Don't you respect my schedule? Okay." This happened a few days ago at my work. I work as a monitor in a company that sells wholesale. We have rotating schedules, so if we have activities outside of work, we have to notify them in advance so they can adjust our schedule. It turns out that this is not the first time that they have told me that I should give more notice. So a week before the next week's schedules were made, I informed my leader about all my activities for the month. He clearly didn't like this, so he told me to send it to him in writing so he could remember and consider it for the schedules. Well, if it had happened like that, I wouldn't be here. I needed to rest on a Sunday because that day I had baking classes, and to come in the morning on Tuesday when I saw the schedules, I got angry. As always, she did what she wanted. She gave me my rest on Tuesday, and on Sunday, she left me in the afternoon, from 2:30 to 11 p.m. My baking class was from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., so it was literally making me choose between my class and coming to work. I was upset because it wasn't the first time it had happened, and I always ended up trying to convince other classmates to change my schedule or break so I could do my activities. I was tired of always looking for solutions for the things she did wrong, and she also had the impudence to take her rest on Sunday. Here comes my malicious fulfillment. I decided to pretend that I never saw the schedules and missed Sunday. I hate uploading statuses to my WhatsApp, but I decided that this time it was a special situation. So I started uploading statuses from my baking class. When I saw that my leader saw my status, I knew that I had won. When it was 3 in the afternoon, my boss, my leader superior, asked me why I had been absent. I told her that I had not seen the schedules, and that since I did what the leader asked me to do, which was to notify her in time and sending him my schedules in writing, I assumed that he had respected it. I knew that I was going to ask my leader, but I also know that she has a reputation as a liar. So I knew that she would try to twist things in her favor. So I sent a screenshot of the conversation in which I told her in detail about my activities. She thanked me and didn't say anything to me. The next day, I found out that she was advised for that, and I got away with it without any repercussions. Then, she tried to justify herself to me by saying that my boss had not approved the schedule, but it is evident that it is a lie. I know they're not going to pay me that day I was absent, but it was worth it to get her scolded, and let's see if she understands that if they don't respect my schedule, I'm just going to be absent, and I'm not going to try and fix their nonsense anymore. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called BillyD1183. It says, next time you have to submit your availability, be sure to CC a couple people up the chain of command, with the explanation that you will be unavailable on such and such day for such and such reason, and will not be able to work. Also request acknowledgement of receipt of the email so they can't claim they didn't see it. OP responded to this one and said, thank you very much for the advice. Although the bad thing is that in this job, we do not have email per se, and we use WhatsApp. But just in case, I took a screenshot of the message. A screenshot that confirmed it was his number, and a screenshot that showed the message was delivered and read. I don't know about this, in any large places that I worked in the past, there were so many people on the schedule that mistakes could happen, and they might miss something like this. It was completely up to you to look at the posted schedule on a certain day and make sure that it wasn't conflicting with any request that you'd put in previously. That was on you. You had to go back and say, hey, I requested this day off. Can you change the schedule? Did you know every KCC video is also produced in podcast form? You can search for Karma Comment Chameleon on every major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.